Hi, welcome to my other show. My name is Susan Rushton, and this is AhMuse. This is the show, my show that am delighted to, I'm thrilled to, I'm honored to, I'm tickled to, I'm impressed with myself to interview people who have been called by the muse. In other words, artists of all stripes. The stripe today is Chase Spruill, Chase Spruill, who is concertmaster of the Auburn Symphony. And may they contact you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so his email is Chase, C-H-A-S-E, Spruill, S-P-R-U-I-L-L, violin at gmail.com. And if you are willing and interested and delighted with this show, and if you've heard anything about the Auburn Symphony, please investigate more. AuburnSymphony.com, and their phone number is 530-823-6683. They're one of my favorite organizations, and I have lots of favorite ones in Auburn, but the Auburn Symphony is just amazing, and this person is one of the reasons. Thank you very much for joining me, Chase.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Oh, good. So tell me what it means to be the concertmaster.
That's a good question. Job-wise, or what does it mean to me personally?
Yes.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, it's a fantastic job to have. I've been involved with Auburn Symphony for, I want to say, 10 to 15 years in various
So you were
capacities.
with Michael?
I was with Michael.
Oh, wow.
Goodwin,
Okay.
Yeah. I was a very young college student at the time when he was starting to bring in different kinds of players to... If he would program something like a Bruckner symphony, then he was going to need a lot of bodies in there to make all the string sounds happen. So I was cutting my teeth, so to speak, on really big repertoire with him, and getting to know the community. Was a sort of bright-eyed and what's the saying, bushy-tailed?
Yes. We're all bushy-tailed in Auburn.
Right. So. Just personally, it's been great because I've been able to be welcomed into a really warm, open community of musicians and people. So there's that level.
Yes.
But then just professionally, it's been an interesting experience moving through the orchestra. Occasionally, I would sit in as concertmaster if they asked for a substitute or something like that. And they were some of my first informative experiences with leading in an ensemble. So professionally, getting to that point where you're now sitting at, in this position where your job is to sort of help maintain morale and promote enthusiasm and high-spirited music making, it's kind of fun.
Good. And is it stressful?
Well,
occasionally,
I think that depends on one's definition of stress.
Okay.
The workload for a concertmaster, depending on what the organization or what the orchestra wants, can be a lot. There's a lot of trying to make sure that bowings are done in advance. It's one of the things I'm still learning how to do efficiently. Bowings, yeah. So every time you see in an orchestra where people are moving their bows back and forth at the same time.
They all have to do it together.
This is a coordinated effort between all of the sections, and usually I lead that coordinated effort. But those bowings have to be informed by what the conductor wants. So there's a conversation with the conductor.
Yes.
What kind of sound are you looking for? You come out with a set of bowings. And then in the first rehearsal or two, the conductor might say, I'm actually looking for a softer sound or a more vigorous sound. And you're back to the drawing board and trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
So all your music has lots and lots and lots of scribbles.
Oh, if you were to look at my music in particular, yeah. And, you know, some of the musicians, they'll say, you know, could you send your part as soon as possible? And I'm thinking to myself, you don't want that. You don't want to see that part. It's ugly. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. So, how long have you been playing the violin?
Oh, gosh, I should know the math on this, shouldn't I? Because people often ask that. But I think it's been 27 years,
Okay.
I think.
Why did you start with the violin? Or why did you end up with the violin? What did you start with? Was it the violin?
I did start, well, you know, officially I started with the violin. My first, instrument I ever had, I was 4 years old. It was an electric guitar.
Oh, you're one of them. Okay.
Yeah, it was an electric guitar, and I don't remember why I wanted to play it. I just know that I wanted to play it. My parents were very supportive. I still have that electric guitar in my house. I started playing violin when I was 10 years old in public schools, and I think the main reason was that I was attracted to the sound. I knew a lot about orchestras from film. I knew about the sound of orchestras from film soundtracks, and there's certain popular music that's utilized large symphony orchestras I was listening to all the time. My parents were taking me to school. That's what I was listening to on the radio with them. I often credit Barry White's Love Unlimited Orchestra as being one of my first loves of orchestral sound. The other thing I usually don't tell people is, I grew up with asthma, so I always had this feeling of wind and brass instruments, that's not for me. But I found out later on that that's not true.
Oh.
That probably would have helped me early on, but this is what I stuck with.
Okay. So you said when your parents took you to school, they were listening to classical music on the radio?
Oh, yeah.
And your family watched these movies with classical music in the background?
Oh, certainly. And if they didn't, then it was just something that I would discover on my own, or they would encourage. By the time I got a little bit older, directors I could watch, like Stanley Kubrick, definitely had classical music as a basis of their soundtracks.
Yeah.
But by the time I really started noticing classical music as a device in films was probably around the same time, 10, 11, 12 years old.
Still, that's young for noticing and caring about classical music. I would have assumed for a 12-year-old, there's that electric guitar. Yeah. And and my parents did the same thing. They would play classical music when they wanted to, and we would be aware of it, and I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
Did it drive you to play ever? Did you play?
Oh, all of us played. I grew up in a musical household, and I took piano. My father worked his way through college playing in a jazz band. So I have his trombone, his trumpet, his double belluphonium.
That's a tall order.
Yes, it is. He played all of those, and I left that house not knowing how to count.
Why?
I don't know. I just hated to practice, and I didn't understand counting, and nobody ever was clear with it. So learn how to count.
Yes, please. It's good for the soul.
Yes, yeah. I can read music. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's a nice chord, but I can't do it fast. I can't, and it's hard to memorize, especially anyway. It's hard.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. So how long have you been with the Auburn Symphony?
In total, I think it's been somewhere between 10 and 15 years.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of starting as their permanent concertmaster, this is my first season doing that.
Okay.
But I've been in and out of that role at different times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with Richard Altenbach when he was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, my beloved Richard Altenbach.
Yes.
And
Richard Altenbach was the concertmaster for lots of years. Yes. Mm-hmm. He had a very wonderful way of dealing with his legs when he was playing.
Yes.
I noticed that.
Yes. He's all involved in it. So he's one of my heroes.
Not that you're not. Before we talk about your violin, I would like to talk about your shoes.
Okay. I've never had anybody ask me about my shoes. What would you like to know?
Well, you always if you could just undo and show them to that.
We're going here. I like this. We're doing this.
Nobody else wears shoes like that, and I noticed them. Yeah. Okay. And what's stunning about them is that they're classy. They are classy up here, and then we have this casual white stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about the casual white stuff.
I know there's this great company called Cole Haan, and I was, like most things, I'm pretty slow to the punch where it comes to like style or anything really new or upbeat. So it sometimes takes somebody to give me a style push before I'll actually try anything new. Okay. Usually on a concert stage, they send out all this information about, what time to get there, but they'll also tell you, like, what's required of you to wear. Yeah. And usually, yes. Yeah, and you try to follow those things. Yeah. But usually, they're asking for a specific kind of shoe. And
that's a specific kind of shoe.
It is a specific kind of shoe.
It's got these dots on the front.
It's like it's kind of old school in a way.
Oh, very,
but
except for that white.
Right. So, well, my parents were both military, and when I first started wearing tuxedos, they had the idea of wearing the kinds of light, shiny military shoes. Okay. So that's how I started, and I think that this was my mom's idea to try and have a different kind of shoe. It wasn't meant to stand out. It wasn't meant to be a statement. Uh-huh. But by the time I did start playing concertmaster and as a violin soloist for orchestras, if you're playing concerto, much like Michael Jackson wore the bunched up white socks as a way to keep some attention to the feet for rhythm. Mm-hmm. I move my feet when I play. You'll occasionally see me tapping my foot. Again, it's not the reason for me wearing the shoes, but it is part of the performance. What you wear is part of the performance. Yes,
you're right.
Drives and influences everything that you do. So I really love these. I don't know how long I'll get away with it. I suppose somebody at some point is going to send me an email.
Oh, Chase.
We did say all black. And what's up with the white stripe? Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like that idea, though. It's fun. So, you play the violin, and if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting him.
The great shoe tying process. Yeah. No, it's a force of habit now.
Okay, we will see your violin in a moment, but how long have you had that violin?
This particular violin, oh goodness. I started playing this violin in college, I want to say. Okay. But in the later part of my, before I was graduating, going out into the world, that's when we decided to get this instrument. Okay. So from a fantastic maker based out of Michigan named Joseph Curtin. Okay. And he's one of those MacArthur fellows who won awards for...
I don't know what that means.
The people that are responsible for innovating things in their field.
Oh.
And he won for the way that he was starting to design these instruments. He was part of a team called Curtin and Alf. And what they would do is take all of the famous instruments, and they would study, the Strads and the Guarnerides down to the finest measurement, and then they would start to replicate the copies down to like every scratch in the front. And they were also trying to innovate how to reproduce some of those sounds, because this was, and this is still true today, but it was getting to a point where instruments were just too expensive for people to have.
So let me hold up the
Sure.
instrument while you're talking.
Sure.
And show it toward your camera.
So, this is an example of one of the instruments that was a replica of a famous instrument. This is a replica of the Del Jesu that Jascha Heifetz used to play. So I used to play on another wonderful violin by the late great Peter Prier, and it was based on the Heifetz Del Jesu. And by the time I needed just another violin that was going to...
Excuse me, I
Yes.
have to interrupt you. It was based on the what?
The Heifetz, Jascha Heifetz Guarnerius Del Jesu. It is...
You're kidding.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, it is, between Antonio Stradivari and Guarneri Del Jesu. Those are sort of the two camps of violin makers from the Italian school in the 1700s that are considered to be some of the greatest instruments in the world. And those are the things that are like millions of dollars and in the hands of private collectors. But, everybody needs an opportunity to play on a great instrument. And Joseph Curtin was part of a school of violin makers who was thinking, well, how could we try to replicate that? Could it be replicated?
We can copy stuff that's... So, would you turn it around?
Sure.
I would like to see those different... There's dark over here, and light here, and light here, and light here. Is that... And that's clearly on purpose. Mm-hmm. Because this is not an ancient thing.
No, I think it's part of the design of the older instruments, like if you were to see on the side, the flames that they have are all part of the design of the instrument. So they try to stay as close as they can to the copy, but it's an aesthetic choice too.
Yes. Now, you've had it for 30 years, 20 years, something like this.
I'm close to 20 years.
I see.
Yeah.
Is this? Was it?
I wish I could tell you this was an aesthetic choice. No, this is just me passionately trying to play and make good sounds and accidentally hitting it with my bow.
He's rubbed off some of the stuff with his horsehair.
But I feel really bad. Yeah, I'm sure there are other violinists in the world who maybe have these perfect, what we call C bouts, but I just wasn't one of them, was I?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very attractive, and I like that idea. I like the fact that it is that grinding down is done from your work.
Yes.
I like that.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank
Good.
you. You might be the first person I've ever heard say that, so I'll accept that.
Okay.
Thanks. Gratefully accepted.
Good. Do you have a name for your violin?
This is the first instrument. What a good question. This is the first instrument. I haven't named this instrument.
But you name your others.
I have. I've always, I had my first instrument I called Charley, after my parents Charlie and Lay.
Uh-huh.
My second one was called Rose, after my nanny, my dad's mom. And I think after that we had, I should remember. I think we had one called Morticia after my grandparents. And then they started getting a little more utilitarian. I had a French instrument that was owned by somebody whose last name was Grossman, so we called it the Grossman.
Okay.
Then it was just the
Okay.
Prier after the maker, and now this one's the Curtin after Joseph Curtin.
Okay, maybe so. Joey.
Joey?
Joe.
I'm not sure. I feel like that would mean a phone call to Joseph Curtin and be like, "How you feel about me calling your instrument Joey?"
Okay. So let's hear you just sort of noodle around on that.
Okay.
And I understand that it's sort of odd for me to ask a musician like you to noodle, but we just want to hear what it sounds like.
Sure. So usually when I'm tuning, I just play with open strings.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And I would like to point out something that I saw. Would you bring back the violin?
Oh, sure.
I see right here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's a rubbing that you've rubbed off the
Varnish.
yeah.
Some varnish.
Does it? And so your fingers rub
Yes.
often. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Or any sweat or any
Yeah.
little dirt on the hand. You're what we call shifting or sliding in order to, because unlike a guitar, that has frets, this is just a desperate attempt to try and get the right swimming in a black pool to get the right note.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, things happen on the body all the time.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
my pleasure.
Why do you think music is important? I know the answer, but tell me why you think it's important.
Oh, if you know the answer, you're a step ahead of the game, because I'm not sure that I know the answer myself.
Well, you love it.
I do.
Do you know why?
I think that, for me personally, people find their way of expressing themselves and being able to communicate with one another eventually. Somehow they find that if they're playing a video game, if they're writing a book, if they're reciting poetry or writing poetry, if they're playing guitar, if they're sculpting, any number of things, if they're engaged in Bible study and quoting verses to one another, they're figuring out a way to have a vessel that helps them connect with one another. Early on, I identified that music was a vessel for me to do something larger, to try to connect, communicate, and to articulate things that I don't necessarily have access to with language right away. I think that's why I love music. That's a question I think about all the time. Why do I love it? Why do I do it? And I think that's the reason. There's something that helps me connect, not just as a player on the stage trying to share with an audience. It's also in the classroom. It's working with young people to try to connect through sound. It's having conversations with composers who are writing the music out on paper that I eventually will try to translate into sound. So there's just a lot of opportunities to try and connect and communicate. I think that's why I love music. I don't know if there had been something else, if I were an actor or something, maybe if I found the same feeling, then I would have been an actor.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. You make your living teaching music, among other ways.
Yes, yes.
But how long have you been a music teacher?
So a lot of people don't believe me when I say this. I started teaching when I was 12. And it's the first job I ever had. It's the only job I've ever had. And I've never stopped.
Aside from this.
No, really. Yeah, really. 12 years old. That was the first job I ever got at a local music store called Live Music Center. I got pretty seriously hurt when I was in school. This is something that a lot of people know, that I had a major knee surgery after getting pushed down on the basketball court. It required multiple surgeries, in and out of rehab, bedridden, wheelchair bound for months and weeks. When I started playing in public schools, that was the big disrupting factor, was that injury. So my parents arranged for me to get private lessons at this store, and not having much else to do, there was just a lot of practicing and playing music. So I got really hugely better at the violin during that time. And the owner of the store at that time
was aware of how well
had an ear, and was starting to have some group classes for young string players and for adults. And they asked me if I would be interested to help the teacher who was going to be teaching those classes, who was in the military reserves. And, I'm 12. They're like, we'll pay you $60 a month. What 12-year-old is going to turn down? It was like $60 a month and some free music books or something. So I went in for training 1 week, and it was a class full of kids and adults. The teacher and I, his name was Dell, we got on really well. He said, great, I'll see you next week. I was like, wonderful. I showed up next week. He'd been called out for service, and they didn't have another teacher. So they're like, just teach the class, and we're going to find someone. I was like, okay, great. And then next week, we haven't found anyone, so just teach the class. We're going to keep going. And it was pretty much that way for I want to say 2 years.
How about 120?
Right, well, to the point where they said, well, some of them want to study privately with you. Would you be interested in doing that? And it just seemed like the thing to do. So it was group classes, eventually private lessons. Even as an adolescent, I was working with adults and young people, communicating the same way, trying to have that same parallel experience of well, this is what I'm doing. Does this work for you? And eventually, doing some student teaching while I was in school at the university level, that translated into working not-for-profit, and then more universities, and now I'm back in the classroom in public school in Vacaville.
In where?
Sierra Vista K-8.
In Vacaville.
In Vacaville, California.
This man lives in Vacaville.
I do. Yes.
He lives in Vacaville, and he comes here at least every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then when you're performing, it's 3 times a week.
3 to 4 times a week.
3 to 4 times a week, and he lives in Vacaville.
Yeah, but as I appreciate the way you say that, because I can forget that is a hike sometimes.
It is a hike.
But the thing that makes it completely worth it is what I said earlier in our conversation, which is the community of people here. They are such a fun bunch, and
hear that? We're a fun bunch.
You're a fun bunch. And the conductors I've been able to work with here, including Michael Goodwin and Peter Jaffe, and now my friend Ryan Murray, Maestro Ryan Murray. You have a way of keeping me coming back for more.
I guess. Yes. So what do you? So I want to go back to the classes you teach. You teach at a school. That's what you teach.
Yes.
At this school.
I am a public school
I am
teacher.
just so thrilled. I hear so much. Oh, nobody ever. They've thrown away music. They've thrown away this.
Yeah.
But that's not true.
It's not true. I mean, it is true in some places,
Yeah.
and I think that a lot of those places have recognized the impact that the lack of music education,
yes.
arts education, is playing out.
Yeah.
So now they have the data, and they're trying to figure out how to get it back.
Right.
But for where I am, I have a hugely supportive community of teachers and administrators who have had musical experiences themselves, and I'm really thrilled with where I am.
Great. So you have children in your classrooms. Some of them are better than others. Some of them get more frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell them when they get frustrated?
Usually, I'm able to tap into some of the experiences I had when I was younger with frustration and assure them that those are not things that have gone away. I can show them that, patience, being able to, do things in practice chunks, being able to make plans for your practicing, letting them know that they don't have to spend 3 hours a night practicing, that they can set manageable goals, just like in every other class and in every other area of their life. These are some of the more practical things that I try to present. But also, frankly, I grew up in a house, both my parents were military, but then went off into, my dad went off into civilian law enforcement and teaching, and my mom went off into social work and therapy. So a lot of their skills I've cribbed and stolen. So shamelessly.
If it works for them.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, even today we were having some issues in the classroom, and we talked about labeling, and they didn't know what labeling was. So I told them a little bit about what I knew about labeling and why I thought it was important, not just for them, but for me and for most people, because sometimes we react to things without knowing why we're reacting to it. And sometimes we have a way of not taking ownership over how we feel or what we do. And we think it's other people, but it's actually us. So if we can identify that thing first, what it is that we're actually feeling and thinking, we can turn that into an actionable step later.
Okay. Yeah. What age level do you teach?
Right now I'm teaching 4th through 8th grade. 4th through 8th grade. General music, beginning orchestra, beginning band, advanced orchestra, advanced band. So the whole range.
Do you teach choir?
I don't teach choir. We have a wonderful choir teacher there right now, Diana Moore. I am not sure the world wants that from me.
Okay.
Maybe some people will say in conversation, but listen to your voice, it's so airy and sounds so comfortable. I bet you could sing. Like, maybe that's true, but do you want me to, is the thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. What I'm hearing, what advice what does it take to be a good musician? You've mentioned practicing, and you've mentioned practicing more than once, and believing that what you practice you'll get better at. Anything else?
I think having an imagination in general is huge in music. Sometimes I see young people who are such good players, and it's because they sit down and listen to their teachers, which is great, and they do the technical exercises, they're told what fingerings to do, and they want to emulate that because they believe that's their path to success. And it can be a path, at least. But I think that having an imagination about musical sound is really, really important. Knowing what's inside of you that drives you, the sound that you want to make, how you hope it creates a response in other people who are listening, who are taking it in. spending a lot of time imagining your sound, I think, is big. And also identifying what music moves you. My joke that I often tell people is that I operate from a limited skill set. And, if you were to ask me who my favorite composer or composers are, like I really only have like 3.
Okay.
No, I have a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the people that I follow a lot are Mozart, but Philip Glass, and professionally and life-wise and love-wise, and Michael Nyman. But there are offshoots of that, of course. How you're not going to say Bach and Beethoven and Brahms.
Well, if you prefer one over the other, then you prefer one over the other.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think that's certainly true. Yeah, I think that the more you can identify what it is that you like about what those composers do, the closer you're moving toward authenticity. I think that in this world, what we're looking for are people that have something to say. Whether or not the world wants to hear it, I think a lot of the world at least admires that you have something.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'm thinking about when when the group rehearses, and I can imagine as you the more you rehearse, of course, the better you get, and the more you hear what it's supposed to sound like and how lovely it is. There's that performing, and then there's performing to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? How is it different?
I think.
Or is it?
Well, that's a great point and a great question, because I liken rehearsal to playing in a sandbox. There are things that you do.
Meaning, let's try this, or let me.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that there's a lot about music and the history of music that's problematic, because we grow up and attach to the things that we attach to, and it can be really hard to do anything different.
Yes.
And there can be a lot of excuse making. Like, well, we're going to do it this way because the rehearsal or the recording I heard in 1962 was like this. Mm-hmm. Or when I played this in 1997, we did it like this. And we should, there's a lot of that can be really difficult. Unless you have a really fantastic leader, which we do, and we often have in Auburn. But the rehearsal process is really close to trying to bring you to a place where you can come comfortably to a decision about how to interpret and share.
Yeah.
And then by the time you have an audience in the house sharing with you, you're comfortably doing what you've already rehearsed and thought about. The last thing I believe you want an audience member to be thinking while you're on the stage is, are they going to make it? Oh no, this is at the end of their ability. Oh, why would a person, after they've had a potentially stressful week, taking care of loved ones, young or old, working full-time or working multiple jobs, why then come to a place and worry about what I'm doing?
Right.
Let me take care of you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the difference. Yeah. There's room to please yourself in the rehearsal, but ultimately you always have the audience on your mind. So once the audience is there, you're really trying to think just about them. Yeah.
And you can tell that there's an audience aside from knowing that there they are.
Right. Yeah. Well, if people don't have experiences playing on a stage, I think one of the things that would shock them is that when the lights are there, it's actually hard to see an audience, which helps you when you're nervous.
Yeah.
But also, if you're trying to connect with them, you really have to use a lot of imagination to think, where are you sending your sound? Don't play too softly. Are you doing some sort of gesture or motion to help the sections stay together? Or are you trying to show the audience something about where the beat is or where the rhythm is? But you're never disconnected from them. I'm never disconnected from them, or I try not to be. So, everything is pretty intentional in a performance.
Okay. Yeah. But do you hear them breathing? You don't hear them breathing? Hear us
Oh,
breathing.
sure,
You do.
sure. You can hear the breathing, the
Sighing?
sighing, laughter sometimes.
Oh, good.
Some people, I was really lucky to be able to do a violin concerto with the orchestra in the beginning of this year. We premiered the Michael Nyman Violin Concerto No. 2, and we had spent a lot of time talking to the audience. We had a pre-talk, and
Sure.
I came out and did some talks in the
Yeah.
community. And the piece largely has its roots in Scottish folk fiddle music, but also in rock and roll. So at the end of the first movement, which is very high energy with all these repetitive rock and roll rhythms, and I have to play very, very hard, at the end of the first movement, we finished the note, and I heard somebody in the audience go, "Wow." And I was like, "Yes!" We have 5 more chapters, but yes,
Yeah,
that's very
yeah,
good. Yeah.
good.
So it's very fun.
Good. Yeah. And you said, yeah, I love being part of the audience. And you said that there are different ways to present a symphony. And I can imagine how tough that would be. I listened to one with the symphony several years ago, and I had never heard that piece before, and it was gorgeous. And then my radio woke me up with that piece, and it wasn't like the way the Auburn Symphony did it. It was wrong.
Interesting. Interesting. Why did it feel wrong to you?
Because it wasn't the way you guys did it.
Huh.
It was what I expected it, that the way you did it was how I first heard it. Way this Auburn, I don't know if you were there then, but the way this Auburn Symphony did it worked for me
Oh.
deeply, and I figured, well, okay, that's how it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
But this other organization, New York, I don't know. Where.
Interesting.
But they didn't do it right because it wasn't the way the Auburn Symphony did it.
Such is the power of formative experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, go Auburn Symphony.
You bet.
At the same
Yeah.
time, I'm like, New York, wow.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. So, all right, let's see. Okay, how can you tell a good musician? Is that an impossible question?
I think it's a subjective question, certainly.
Sure.
How can you tell a good musician? From the audience perspective? Or from the perspective of somebody you hope to join in the work with you?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about the people, somebody's applying. If a person knows what he's doing and feels comfortable doing it,
Yeah.
that's a good musician.
Yes. I like your definition. That's well, it's you're right, because if the listener or audience member or however you're listening has their own set of criteria they've never shared with the world, that can be an impossible task. The person shows up from whatever city they show up from, with their experiences that they've had, whatever they may be, and if you've never heard, let's say from you, like, I prefer a lot of heavy emotion, or what we, in the violin world, we might use a lot of vibrato, where our hand is shaking and it sounds like we're making a singing tone. And if I don't do that, well, then I failed you horribly. And you could feel like, at the end of your experience, well, that wasn't a very good musician, was it? But the person sitting next to you had a different experience altogether.
Yeah.
So I think that, more broadly, a so-called good musician has enough imagination to know that they're walking into somebody's house with a breadth of different experiences and wants, needs, and desires. and they're going to try really hard to accomplish those things while staying true to what the composer might have written,
Right.
while staying true to the collaborative nature of whatever group they are playing or working with, and staying true to what they think and feel. I
Okay.
think that the experienced musician is going to work really hard to do all those things. That's probably why, if you've ever seen anyone at the end, they can't really speak. They're like, if you say to me at the end of a concert, like, oh,
Thank
that
you
was
so-
wonderful, and let me tell you why it was wonderful. I'm going to be like, that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I believe what you believe, because I have nothing to say. I left it all out there on the stage.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, you're very briefly, you're working with a record company,
Yes.
and and the message I got at the beginning is, before we started taping, is that you don't know what to play for the record company. No.
I don't know that I meant to broadcast that message.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
No, I mean, like, I don't think that was what I was meaning to say.
Okay.
But
How many records have you made?
I'm pretty new to this. I've made 3 albums, and I've recorded a few singles or EPs, as they
Okay.
call it. But I work with Philip Glass's record label, Orange Mountain Music. And
Orange Mountain Music.
Orange Mountain
Yeah.
Music. So much.
OrangeMountainMusic.com.
Gosh, I should know that.
Okay.
I
Orange
would-
Mountain
yeah.
Music. Just look at it.
I would
Look for it.
Google Orange Mountain Music
Yeah.
and Philip Glass.
Yeah.
And Super Train Records. I work really closely with my friend Richard Guerin, who is like one of the main sources of energy and inspiration in my musical life. He's kind of I guess it's not a great term, but he's like the wonderful musical troublemaker, because he knows how to get me excited about something, and suddenly I'm off
Cool.
on this new project.
Okay. Wow. Alrighty. So, Chase Spruill.
Spruill.
Chase, it's been a wonderful half hour. This is wonderful. Chase is concertmaster at the Auburn Symphony. And if you want to learn more about him, you can email him, chase.spruill.violin@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about the Auburn Symphony, do yourself and me and Chase and the symphony a favor. Mainly you. AuburnSymphony.com, and they have a phone number, 530-823-6683. You'll be thrilled. It's a fabulous organization. Again, Chase, thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining me.
This was a real thrill. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for watching.